Dawson, welcome to the show.
It's such a joy to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So we'll start off tonight with a question that is my favorite way to start out every episode. What are the non-negotiables or unusual things you've done for your health and performance tonight?
I meditate every single day, and that's non-negotiable just because it affects your entire day. You perform much better, you think much better, your body functions much better. And so that's really the baseline of well-being for me.
I want to start off with a couple stats. There's a lot of meditation skeptics, and these ones really stood out to me as to the power of meditation. And the first show that when you're in the flow state, which we'll cover what that is later, it increases your ability to solve strategic problems by up to 500%. And then another one is the DARPA neurofeedback study, where practicing neurofeedback increased the complex problem solving and skill mastery by 490%. So these are benefits you can get from a practice that we're going to talk about tonight.
People tell me sometimes, Dawson, I don't have time to meditate. I'm saying, you don't have time to do something that'll take you 20 minutes at the start of each day, and it'll increase your problem-solving ability fivefold for the next 48 hours. Really? You don't have time to do that? You don't have time to take this huge, big leverage point of your time and your productivity and your creativity and your problem-solving ability, and you don't have time to take that huge, enormous, big lever and use it for a short while to improve flow and performance for 2 days? Really? You don't have time for that?
It doesn't just last for 10 minutes, an hour. Your research has shown that these increases last up to a day.
Actually, research by Teresa Amabile at Harvard shows that get into that kind of a flow state, it actually shifts brain function for 48 hours. A day and a half, 2 days later, your brain is still running and tuned and functioning more efficiently.
Wow. So I actually haven't told you this, but one day I was on a plane flying back from Mexico, and I picked up your original book, or one of your original books, one of your many books, called Mind to Matter. And I went in as a skeptic to meditation and spirituality, and you did a nice job of fusing the two worlds, the scientific on one hand and the spiritual on the other. And I think it was packed like 400 plus studies showing how like our internal reality impacts the external material world. And after I read that book, it was a page turn. I got through it in a couple days. Then I started practicing something you came up with called EcoMeditation. Tell me how you came to that.
By being a totally terrible, failed meditator, Nick. I actually have an award on my wall over here. You can't see it, it's in front of me over here. It's the world's worst meditator award. So I got the award for being the world's worst meditator. I learned to meditate when I was like 15 years old, 13 years old, teenager. And I just struggled. I couldn't still my mind. Like they say, the simplest form of meditation is to count your breaths. You know, what could be simpler than 1, 2, 3? I could never get to 10. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. I could never make it to 10. I could rarely make it to 5 without my mind wandering and forgetting what number I was on. So I was just, I had a monkey mind. I was at the king of all monkey mind. So I just crashed and burned. I read meditation books. I took meditation courses, went to go see gurus, took university courses, did all this different exploration, different styles of meditation, and crashed and burned at every single one. So those are my credentials for being the developer of meditation. And eventually I realized that I was trying to do it with my mind, and the mind is inherently not made to be still. I now use an analogy that I love, which is I have a bird feeder outside my window, and those birds land on the feeder. Now, when I land at my dinner table to eat, I eat slowly and mindfully and enjoy every bite. The birds just descend on the bird feeder, peck at the bird seed, look up, look down, look to the side, look around, peck a little bit more. I mean, they're the reverse of mindful eating, because there's a cat down below, which every once in a while jumps up and tries to grab a bird. There's a hawk that circles above, which every once in a while swoops down. If those birds ate the mindful eating bird is dead. Is the dead bird. So the mind is not meant to be that way. And my huge insight was I was never going to succeed at stilling my mind. So I needed to find another approach. And the approach I used was the body. So we know that if you slow your breathing down to 6 seconds per in-breath, 6 seconds per out-breath, you go into heart coherence. That heart coherence puts you into brain coherence. puts your peristalsis into coherence, puts all kinds of physiological routines into coherence. So if you just breathe in that 6-second rhythm, that'll put you into coherence. And then if you do things like imagine a big empty space inside your body, that puts you in alpha. You then can shift yourself into vagus, parasympathetic mode very, very quickly. But all of these are physical cues to your body, and you can have as monkey a mind as you want, and those things will still work. So people sit down over and over and over again. I mean, one guy, he was an Iraq veteran. His name is Bryce Rogo, has a beautiful testimonial on EcoMeditation.com. He just stumbled across it on the internet after having done everything to try and recover from PTSD, including going to Japan and being in a Zen monastery for many, many months, doing meditation under a prominent Zen master there. He tried everything and couldn't meditate. He sat down just with that internet page on EcoMeditation.com, followed the 7 simple, again, physiological steps, and suddenly, boom, he was there. So that's what my biggest insight was. You can't do it mentally very easily with a lot of discipline, but you can if you just do certain physical things, send a cue to your body that puts you in that state.
Mm-hmm. In your book, you mentioned there's 7 different types of meditation, 7 categories. What are those?
Yeah, and these are drawn from traditional meditation schools. And one of them is following your breaths. And you just, again, notice your breaths, count your breaths usually. Another of them is releasing thought. Mindful meditation has you notice a thought flowing in, and then they say, just treat it like a cloud across the sky, it'll flow out again. My problem was one flowed in, another flowed in, a third flowed in, a 15th flowed in, and suddenly my mind was like a sky full of clouds. So that didn't really work for me. I love moving meditations, and there are a number of schools. Tai Chi and Qigong use slow martial arts type movements. Yoga uses these beautiful body postures. So some people, it's a moving meditation. Walking meditation falls into that same category. So you can take a walk, but again, a walking meditation in Buddhism is very different from just taking a stroll in the park. You're placing each step slowly and carefully, each foot in front of the other one, with a highly conscious gait. So there's walking meditation. There are meditations that have to do with focusing on a sound, a chant, a gong, a mantra. Those are one style of meditation. Lectio Divina, if you're a Catholic, you probably know what Lectio Divina is. If you aren't, you probably think it's Latin, which it is. And it just means reading the works of masters. So you go read Hafiz, you read Rumi, you read Kabir, you read Nanak, you read Jesus, you read Saint Teresa of Avila, you read some of these inspirational figures because they've done their best. I mean, these are people who reached extraordinary peak states, and they're really keen to share them with you. They wrote stuff to share them with you. So you go read St. John of the Cross, or you read Rumi, and then you are able to touch their experience vicariously, and that puts you into the mood. So I'm not sure if I remembered all 7 of them, but that's pretty much, you got a wide variety of things you can do there to try and induce a meditative state. Eco-meditation, again, simply focuses on physiology to put you there.
I hadn't realized that studying some of the ancient mystics is a form of meditation in itself.
Yeah, you're trying to inhabit their experience, and you find yourself drawn into their story and their words. When you read the words of Rumi, and Rumi's the most popular poet in America, and he just will transport you to this remarkable place for a while. Now, that doesn't mean you actually get to inhabit that long term, but if we did a study. Oh, this is one of my crash and burn failures, Nick. I was doing a study with Joe Dispenza of brain states and EEGs. So I wanted a control group that was doing something that they thought was effective, placebo. So I said, well, I'll just read a bunch of Rumi poems. I mean, no way that's going to change their brains. Got the results back. The Rumi group had significant brain change.
Oh, man. Interesting. So meditation is one of those things that I feel like everyone has tried, but very few people stick with and make it a daily practice. That's a whole nother level. Why is it that people find meditation so difficult to commit and maintain?
The monkey mind. It's that they're trying to use the monkey mind like they're trying to quiet the monkey mind when we evolve in an environment full of threats. And basically, if you think about your ancestors 10,000, 100,000 years ago, they need to have their minds alert to threats all the time. And the person who was happy and optimistic, I mean, just imagine two of your ancestors walking down the path in the forest 100,000 years ago, and there's this brown squiggly thing lying on the ground in front of them. And the pessimist says, it's a snake, it's going to bite me. The optimist said, no, it's just a stick, sticks fall from the trees all the time around here. So the pessimist is always thinking that every single one of those objects is going to be a snake, and they have a really gloomy view of the world. And of course, 99 times out of 100, it is a stick. And so they've driven their cortisol sky high, they've shortened their life, they've produced all kinds of negative shifts in their body from stress by thinking that every single stick is a snake. But the one time out of 100 it is a snake, they live. The optimist, that person who says it's just a stick, so they don't take any precautions. It is a stick. They're right 99 times out of 100. Mm. But the one time out of 100 that they were wrong. Mm-hmm. So the optimists were weeded from the gene pool, and we've evolved these brains that are so absolutely geared. A ton of hardware in our brains is devoted to identifying threats. And so when you try and meditate, that threat detection equipment is not going to just turn off. It's still highly active. And that's why we can't meditate. Our minds just jump from thought to thought. Even experienced meditators, I don't know really who's right here. Andrew Newberg tells me that even experienced meditators, it takes at least 20 minutes for their mind to settle down. Less experienced ones, 40 minutes if you're lucky. With EcoMeditation, we've been able to shorten it to about 5 minutes for most people. Some of them are under a minute. But again, if you spend, say you decide to spend 30 minutes of meditation, if it takes you 25 minutes to calm your mind, you've only got 5 minutes of meditation actually left. If you can calm it in 5 minutes, you get 25 minutes of meditation. So that's the big challenge. Our minds were not meant to be calm, and we're trying to do something that evolution really did not equip us for when we meditate. That's why people fail.
Yeah. And like you said, the quicker you can drop into that state, the more time you get to reap the benefits. And I think you mentioned in your book that the best way to counter that is to stay in a similar state throughout the day.
And I'm not training people to do this. And the meditative state is the cornerstone of the practice. You have to spend the time in the morning. And so you do that in the morning. But what we find is that sense of well-being that you feel in meditation starts to intrude, just pop into your day. So as before, you often had intrusive thoughts and negative thoughts pop into your day. Now you're just standing in line at the grocery store, and this immense gratitude and sense of well-being just floods over you. Like I do a fair amount of driving in my car, and I quit listening to the radio. I just quit listening even to music. I get in the car, I just bask in well-being. So it does begin to condition your day. And what we're now realizing, the really most advanced neuroscientists are realizing that this is because it's actually reshaping your brain. A few parts of your brain initially, like the emotional regulation center, but afterwards it's starting to shape the occipital lobe, which governs the way you literally interpret what you see through your eyes. It starts to change the temporal lobe, the parietal lobe. And so after a while, you just find yourself most of the day drifting in the sea of bliss. Now, that's not after the first month. I don't want to sort of be doing any false advertising here. It's not like you start doing EcoMeditation and you start to be filled with bliss right away. But we find people make significant changes in their well-being after just a couple of months. And then after a while, you just start to enjoy this so much that it becomes something you want to do and slip into whenever you have a free moment during the day. So you do have a sense of well-being during the day after a time of practice.
If you're able to, I'd love to cover some of the basics of neurochemistry and neuroscience, such as you keep referencing in the book the default mode network and also the enlightenment circuit. What are those?
So here's another way I was totally wrong. I wrote the Genie in Your Genes, the first draft in 2004, 2005. I was working with Bruce Lipton on his book, The Biology of Belief, and I was focused on all the genes that we can shift in our bodies by either positive or negative states. And what I argued back then was that, hey, we have a default mode network, we have a stress system in our brains, it's highly active all the time. That's just how we are. It's the fundamental anatomy of our brains. And what we didn't know about then is we have a second network in our brains, which I call, in my new book, Bliss Brain, I call that the Enlightenment Network. We just didn't know about it back then in 2004. We discovered it piecemeal over the last 10 years or so. And so the default mode network is called the default mode network because when we aren't doing stuff, our brains default to this network. It's a region of area, set of regions in the center line of your brain, starts right around here behind your forehead, runs all the way back into parts of your brain, toward the back of your brain, the precuneus. There's a cortex back there that's highly active in conjunction with the one in the front of your head. And so that's what your brain defaults to. And that's where we spend our time in the brain regions are active when we aren't doing stuff. So if I do stuff, I'm looking at my desk over here and I've got a pile of papers, stuff I need to do over here. If I pick up my papers and start shuffling them around and reading them and getting engaged, doing emails, my task positive network fires up because I'm doing a task. And that then draws that energy that was being used by my default mode network. But if I go sit on the couch over here next to me and I just relax and daydream for a while, my positive network shuts down because I'm not doing a task, and my default mode network cranks up. And the way I wish God, if I could talk to God and say, would you mind redesigning me a little bit? I would make my default setting happiness. I would make my default mode setting. I'd sit there on the couch and I'd feel so wonderful. I'd be filled with joy and awe and gratitude. And God, you made a big mistake. I'm just having a little conversation over here with God. Made a big mistake because what we default to instead is misery. These two Harvard psychologists designed a massive study. It's been going on for years now. And they send random signals to people's cell phones and they ask them, what are you doing right now? And how do you feel? And what they found, gathering data now from millions of people, millions of data points, is that when people are doing stuff, they're generally pretty happy. When they're not doing anything, they're generally pretty miserable. So the default mode network is preoccupied with the bad stuff that happened to you yesterday or 10 years ago or in your childhood, and it projects that into the future and says, well, that bad stuff might happen in the future as well. So the default mode network reprocesses and reconsiders stuff that almost killed you in the past, or certainly that hurt you in the past, and what might hurt you in the future. And so we ruminate on stuff, and it's called worry. And we just worry when we aren't doing a task. And so that's what the default mode network does. And this drives meditators crazy because they close their eyes and try and meditate, and suddenly they're thinking about whether they put too much jelly on the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches of their kids that they sent to school that morning, or the report that's due on the boss's desk next week, or something. Our minds just can't be default to worry. And unfortunately, that has an effect on our longevity. People who worry a lot, their brains change in various adverse ways. They have much shorter lifespans, and those lifespans are pretty miserable. So that's what the default network is, what it does, and you have to learn to quiet that part of the brain.
So that's the same thing as the monkey mind.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And what you were just saying right there, the worriers tend to have shorter lifespans and a lower quality of life. That has to do with epigenetics?
Well, if you think a negative thought, if I have a little negative thought, it's not really going to hurt me much. I mean, I have a negative thought, maybe I have a strong emotion to accompany that, my cortisol rises a little bit. And that's it, this evening. I have another negative thought tomorrow morning, I'll have another little rise in cortisol. If I'm doing negative thinking throughout the day, often, then I'm driving my cortisol high in the absence of threats. And high cortisol correlates with reduced muscle mass, reduced bone density, poor cognition, poor learning, increased skin wrinkling, accelerated aging. All of these things result from high cortisol. So that one little thought I have, which boosts my cortisol now, and then the other little thought, I'm not going to drop dead from any of those thoughts, but stack those up day after day, week after week, month after month, and research giant longitudinal studies of tens of thousands of people show that optimists live 10 years longer than pessimists. There are no snakes, there are no tigers anymore. And so now our own worry is our biggest predator. Wow. I hadn't ever thought of that before, but that's worry is the predator that's going to eat you alive. And those pessimists have 10-year shorter lifespans than optimists. So it has a long-term effect on your body to do that negative thinking.
So could that be why people tend to avoid downtime and bounce from one thing to the next because they don't want to activate the default mode network and ruminate and worry?
We fill our lives with busyness and activity. I watch people and they have a moment to sit there and take a rest, take a break. And rather than looking at the birds and the trees and getting lost in the beauty around them, they whip out their phones. You watch people in the park. They're in the park, for goodness sake. You have walked to the park to enjoy nature, and you spend your time in the park doing this. It's nuts. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's just, we have all these times we should be really resting, loving ourselves, sinking into nature, doing nothing. When I'm doing, it's hard for me to do nothing personally, Nick. So every once in a while, I'm sitting there in the beach chair. I take long retreats, usually a month, 2 months, 3 months at a time sometimes. And I wave to my wife and I say, look, darling, look, I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing. Hard but necessary.
For me, if I don't schedule downtime on my calendar, it doesn't happen. So I'm the same way. And I'll often go into the park to read. I'll sit down and I'll read, and I'll realize that I was there the whole time without even looking up.
Yes, absolutely. Well, schedule it first. I have my downtime scheduled out for the next 18 months. I can tell you what conferences I'll be speaking at, what podcasts I'll be doing. I'm going a long way out into the future, but my downtime is scheduled first, and it's totally sacred. There are no meetings at that time. I don't do any media during that time. I'm really showing up for just being.
That's the best way to do it. Treat it like a doctor's appointment or any other important meeting you have.
Absolutely. More important than a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you mentioned the different brain waves throughout the book, and those are of interest to me because it's a way of self-quantifying where you are. And can you give us a background on what the brain waves are?
Yeah, so there are several different brain waves that human brains have, and the two slowest waves are delta, 0 to 4 cycles per second, and brainwaves are just the speed at which neurons fire. So delta, say 2 cycles per second, the neurons are just firing at 2 cycles per second, and that enables them to communicate with distant neurons. The resonance means they can talk to distant neurons if they're firing at the same frequency. So delta is slow, 0 to 4, about that is theta, 4 to 8, about that is alpha, 8 to 13, about that is beta, 13 to 30, and about that is gamma. And so we're in one of those states all day long, or a mixture of them. The two slowest ones are theta and delta. We're there when we sleep. We then drift down into sleep. We're going into alpha. We're also in alpha when we're just resting between the tasks. If you really do get involved in looking at nature and really resting, you'll be in alpha. And then beta is the wave of ordinary consciousness. Gamma is this high wave. And these monks who've done 10,000 plus hours of meditation, they have enormous amounts of gamma, and it's the wave of creativity, the wave of gratitude, the wave of happiness, So people who have, these monks can have 25 times the gamma of baseline. They are extraordinarily happy. I mean, the reason that they look so stoned is because they are. They are just absolutely unbelievably stoned on this huge amount of gamma going through their brains. And so you want to cultivate those brain waves. Also genius, people who are highly creative, people in flow, athletes in flow. And it's a paradox because the thinking brain, which is so useful many times during our days, actually shuts down when people are in gamma, but waves of insight happen. So the thinking brain is very, very quiet. It's not very active. And yet you're having these brilliant insights at the same time. So there are a lot of paradoxes in flow. And so we want to get into flow, spend most of our days there, spend our work days there for sure, as much as possible. And those are the basic waves, and you can cultivate them. In Mind to Matter, Nick, when I looked at this research, I was just amazed to read what those different frequencies do in our cells. Just for example, certain frequencies in theta actually stimulate the repair of DNA. Other frequencies also in theta stimulate the conductive properties of neurons in our learning system. They conduct energy better. Other frequencies in delta, some of the frequencies in delta, very, very slow waves, actually stimulate the production of telomerase
Mm-hmm.
in our bodies. So they're having an amazing rejuvenating effect, and people who are under stress have less of all those brain waves. So you want to cultivate the healthy, happy brain waves.
A minute ago, you mentioned that the certain like advanced meditators can achieve these gamma states, I guess blissed out states. And is that simply a function of their brain being in gamma, or is it also because of some of the bliss chemicals that they produce?
Yeah, a section in Mind to Matter about the bliss chemicals, a very short section. And then Bliss Brain really is developing that whole idea, because I began to wonder why I was so happy. I wrote Bliss Brain in the year after my home was destroyed in a very fast-moving wildfire. And my wife and I escaped just moments before literally everything we had was burned. We lost absolutely everything in our lives. We grabbed our cell phones and computers on the way out, and the car keys. We drove out of through the flames. But we lost absolutely everything we owned. And then the next year, we just had a total financial crash. I had a health crash. And in the middle of all those multiple disasters, I wrote Bliss Brain, because I would meditate and I'd be in this extraordinary state of absolute bliss. Like I wrote this long journal entry in my journal one day. We couldn't make payroll. I drained my retirement savings. I had to drain my youngest son's college savings. We had no money. We were just scraping by trying to meet payroll, borrowing money. And I wrote this journal entry in Bliss Brain about how abundant I was. This made no sense from a logical standpoint whatsoever. And I began to grope for explanations. How can I be so absolutely blissful when people look at me and say, Dawson Church, your life is toast? So I began to look into it, and I realized that bliss molecule, anandamide, that meditators get in their brains, it's called a bliss molecule because it docks with the same receptor sites in the brain as THC, the main ingredient in marijuana. But basically, you have this synthetic stuff, THC, which you can ingest or smoke, but you have natural THC in this form of anandamide in your brain, natural cocaine and heroin in the form of dopamine, natural magic mushroom, psilocybin in the form of serotonin. Mm-hmm. And so I was driving these neurochemicals sky high in my brain, and I was blissing out despite all the chaos around me. So it's partly because you're literally drugged. And one of the problems we have, and we're stumbling toward a solution here, but if you listen to EcoMeditation, it always ends the same way. And that same way is bringing you back down to earth. It's having you look around you, notice the letter H, the numeral R, the numeral 8. It's having you find stuff in your environment. Look for the smallest cylinder in your environment. It puts you back in the here and now, because people in just a few minutes get so far out there that they have a hard time relating to the here and now. And I personally struggle with this. I mean, last month we had Russian hackers hack our main server. Oh. We have a huge number of visitors to our site. And so we have hackers that try and get into it. And we had one successfully hack us. And do I really want to go deal with Russian hackers when I come back from meditation? I don't think so, but I have to. I run a big nonprofit. I run a sizable training company. So you have to make that transition and then be in your real world as well. But I can tell you, it's not exactly something you rush to do after meditation.
Yeah. So you said that the neurochemicals of ecstasy, the 7 of them are dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and then there's anandamide. And then
nitric oxide and beta endorphin.
And what are those two responsible for? What about oxytocin?
Oxytocin is called the hug drug because it's released during touch and sex. So some highly sexual species make huge amounts of it. We human beings make quite a lot of it, and it's a result of touch. And if you touch a person, hug a person, or if you're just emotionally close to a person, you start to drive oxytocin high. It also is responsible for a lot of sexual function and reproductive function. Like if, say, for example, you're a woman, you're in hospital and you're giving birth, and your labor contractions aren't coming strong enough to push the baby out, they give you Pitocin, which is synthetic oxytocin. It's responsible for contractions during birth. It's also responsible, there's very little known studies showing that's actually responsible for a large part of the male erection. And this is hardly known at all. I mean, there's no literature on this, hardly at all. There's just a couple of very intriguing studies showing that the more oxytocin, because oxytocin is produced by emotional closeness. So it's really key to closeness in families, among friends, even the Hells Angels. I mean, by hanging together and driving their motorcycles, they're producing spikes of oxytocin. So that's a big neurochemical you get there. And the cool thing about meditation is that when you meditate, you aren't focusing on loving a person. You're focusing on being in love with all of life and with the universe, being a non-local mind. And so you have these huge surges of oxytocin going through your bloodstream. And there's no one person there. There's only the all that is. So you are literally in love with the all that is. And that's what produces the sensational poetry of a Rumi or a Hafiz. They are in love with all that is. That's how St. Teresa wrote the Interior Castle. They are in these exquisite states of love. I mean, there's a lot of erotic metaphors in these people. Many of them were monks and nuns, and they were chaste. They never had sex, but they're writing this orgasmic love poetry to the divine because they were under the influence of oxytocin.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just oxytocin. There's also, what are the roles of beta endorphins and also nitric oxide?
Beta endorphins, morphine, synthetic morphine was derived, it works because it docks with the same receptor sites, has the same molecular shape morphine has as our own body's own natural endorphins, especially beta endorphin. And beta endorphin is so strong, it's 3 times as strong as synthetic morphine. So you start to make beta endorphin and it masks pain. Like I'll sit down to meditate in the morning and my knee hurts a little bit, my back is a little bit tweaked from the day before. I did something when I was out exercising. And then after 10 minutes of being in meditation, that has masked all my pain, just like taking morphine does. So that's what beta endorphin does. Norepinephrine is interesting because norepinephrine is a stress neurochemical. It's adrenaline. Yeah. And normally you want to have a little bit of adrenaline, but you don't have a lot of adrenaline. A lot of adrenaline will produce big beta brain waves and make you nervous, give you a panic attack. So a lot of adrenaline is not good, excessive adrenaline. Moderate adrenaline is a performance drug, and it makes you moderately high. And the other final one is nitric oxide. And what that does is it expands the capillaries in your prefrontal cortex. And that means you don't fall asleep. We don't want you to fall asleep. Another occupational hazard of meditators is they feel a lot of serotonin. And serotonin is a cousin of melatonin. And melatonin makes you go, which you do if you don't have a little bit squirt of nitric oxide first. So when I design meditations with people, I give them nitric oxide first to make those capillaries in their brains big, full of oxygen, full of nutrients, so they stay awake. Then we give them the serotonin.
You mentioned that you worked alongside Dr. Joe Dispenza, right?
Yeah.
Have you, how does his model of the pineal gland transmuting melatonin into all kinds of other metabolites, how does that coincide with your list of neurochemicals of ecstasy?
Joe is really doing some advanced work, and I've actually done several studies of his work with him. I did one study where I designed, and I went to a Joe workshop with a bunch of assistants and a bunch of vials. We collected DNA samples from people. We analyzed their DNA before and after the workshop. We found that there were 8 genes that were upregulated by being in a Joe workshop. So it's powerful to do these kinds of practices. And then he's exploring the various metabolites of melatonin and serotonin that are produced in various parts of the brain. And he's actually got a team now working on this research. So over the next few years, we'll see studies published where he initially you have a hypothesis, which Joe's really good at. Then you test it out. Like his hypothesis was that there'll be differential gene expression. We now have a paper showing there is. So he'll be publishing that work over the next while, and we'll start to map these states. Initially, these are observation. So Joe will have an observation. People in my workshop are having these experiences. That means this is likely to be happening in their brains. Then we'll hire scientists, we'll test that, and we'll see, well, it isn't happening quite that way, it's happening this way. We'll develop a new hypothesis, and that's the way research advances. So all of these things, science figures out how things happen many years after the fact we figure out that things happen. So we know if you meditate in certain ways, like Joe recommends, that you're going to feel that real high. We don't know why yet. It might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years before we can trace the mechanisms. And there's about that time lag in a lot of advanced neuroscience.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're mapping out these states and you're working on this research, how are you guys quantifying what brain state someone in? What technology is that?
We use advanced EEGs, and just like if you think about the first iPhone you bought, maybe in 2004, when the iPhones first came out, or I had a flip phone before that, I had a Nokia flip phone, and it was all pixelated. So it had very low resolution. I don't know what the resolution was, but you see all the figures rendered in these chunks. And so that was early EEGs, early MRIs back in the 1990s, 1980s. Early 2000s, and then just like the way you now have a retina display, and now the retina display, the newest generation of Macs have LED displays, amazingly crisp and clear.
Yeah.
Same thing with EEGs. Our EEGs have been getting much more high resolution, and your screen or your phone uses pixels. I mean, all know what a pixel looks like, a little square thing, color thing. Those instruments use voxels because the voxels are three-dimensional. They're like little cubes. And so the resolution of these has become better and better and better. So we've been using EEGs over the last 20 years. We're using MRIs over the last 10 years, and they're getting much more precise. And we can see now down to the level of a bundle of neurons, what's going on in the brain. It is so exciting because we now know which, for example, one big question is which brain regions grow? Does this brain region grow when you meditate in this style? And if you meditate in a different style, does it also grow that brain region or does it not? So we're really piecing this together. The newest stuff is in my book, Bliss Brain. That's our state-of-the-art knowledge of how the brain changes under the effect of meditation. But in 10 years, the book will be obsolete. Over the next 50 years, we'll have a much clearer idea of how the brain responds to this.
Are there any at-home devices you like so that someone who's interested in this can try out your technique, which we'll discuss in a minute, and then actually visualize the progress they're making in terms of their brainwaves?
Some people use the Muse, and they use the Muse with EcoMeditation tracks, and they can see that they're making a lot more gamma, that their alpha is expanding, that their beta is going away. So people use the Muse. If you use the Muse, you have to use a piece of research software.
Is it called Mind Monitor?
Yeah, that's the new name for it. And so you use that with the Muse, and it shows you your brain waves. And it's really interesting to do that. You can do it in real time. And I have some images from the Mind Monitor in Bliss Brain in color. And you see how people, after just one meditation, their brain function changes.
Wow. Okay, well, I can't hold this off any longer. Let's dig into EcoMeditation, because when people talk to me about meditation, this is one of the ones that got me interested, engaged, and whenever I'm flying, I have those tracks downloaded on my phone. So it's really easy just to pop in the earbuds, listen to those tracks, and every single time I do it, I feel night and day different afterward. I can't say that about most meditations.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I think simple physiological cues, relax your tongue, breathe 6 seconds in and out, really can shift you. And then if you listen to the newer EcoMeditations, like from the last 2 or 3 years, new research came out showing that the fastest thing, like I asked some embarrassing questions in Bliss Brain, embarrassing to meditation styles and teachers, because I didn't really have any investment in any guru or any religion or any meditation style. I just asked, what does neuroscience show us works? And it turns out there's one thing that works better than everything else from MRI studies, and that one thing is compassion. And I realized we had a little bit of compassion going on in EcoMeditation. And so the newer EcoMeditations the last 2 or 3 years, I really cranked up the emphasis on compassion. So that's why you feel so good. You're imagining a sense of connection with another being. You're feeling in your heart. and it's producing spectacular, rapid changes in brain function. So that's the benefit of the loop between doing a meditation, doing MRIs, feeding it back into practice, studying people again, and refining the practice.
Will you break down the basic steps and then also like what that correlates with in terms of either the bliss chemicals or the brainwave states?
Yeah, one thing you do is you get into heart coherence. Now, I was at a conference with Roland McCraney, who's the chief scientist at HeartMath, maybe in 2010, 2009. And he said to me, I was talking about meditating and being in heart coherence. And he said to me, Dawson, we find that when meditators meditate, when they go from ordinary consciousness to meditation, they drop out of heart coherence. And I was like, no way. So I went home after the conference, and my housemate at the time was a long-time meditator, meditated an hour a day. His name was Jeff Anderson. And so I said, Jeff, would you mind if I hook you up to an EEG and a heart rate monitor while you meditate? And he did. And sure enough, he dropped out of heart coherence every time he meditated. I looked up other people, found the same thing. So I realized we needed to design a meditation that would keep people in heart coherence. Now, HeartMath has little devices that you can buy and use. They also have a smartphone app you can use. But if you just slow your breathing to 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out, automatically you go into heart coherence. And if you breathe through your heart, imagine yourself breathing through your heart, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, that's one physiological cue that puts you into heart coherence. If you relax your tongue, it sends a signal to your vagus nerve, which governs the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the relaxation response and relaxation signaling.
Relax so your tongue being on the floor of your mouth?
On the floor of your mouth. If you relax your tongue on the floor of your mouth, you send a signal through your vagus nerve to relax. You then picture a big empty space between your eyes. And I got that idea from a guy called Les Fahmy, and we were both contributors to a book called Measuring the Immeasurable, The Scientific Case for Spirituality, in I think 2006. And so the book came out. I had written a chapter in the book, but Les Fahmy wrote a chapter in the book as well. And he'd been like one of the pioneers of biofeedback, neurofeedback in the 60s and 70s at Princeton University. And they had these huge Cray supercomputers, these massive machines. They took people up and they trained them to develop alpha waves. But Les Fahmy wrote one sentence in that book that just blew my mind. He said, we were training people to develop alpha with these biofeedback training programs, took a few weeks with a supercomputer, blah, 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 all this equipment, lab assistance. But we found that if we had people picture a big empty space between their eyes, they went into alpha immediately. I'm thinking, okay, Cray supercomputer, 6-week training program, lab assistance, all that. Or just picture a space between your eyes. I think I'm going to pick option B.
Yeah.
So I just found these super simple ways of bypassing all the equipment, all the, I mean, you can get into some of these states using drugs, using high tech. Why do you need tech? Why do you need drugs? We can just do all this stuff ourselves. So each of those steps of EcoMeditation is a simple one, like the one that Les Fahmy gave us. Just picture the big empty space between your eyes, and then feel compassion, feel a sense of compassion, feel a sense of unconditional love, and that'll put you into deep heart coherence. And that's you do these 7 steps, just one after the other, fairly mechanically. You don't believe in anything, believe in anyone, have a religion, you can be an atheist, and you'll move into this really deep state, and you'll remain in heart coherence, and you'll feel a difference in your body right away, because your body just feels wonderful to be in that deeply relaxed state.
What I love about EcoMeditation is that you're pulling a little something from so many other practices, from the best of the best in neuroscience research, and you're synthesizing it into one practice. And I guess the proof is in the pudding, because in your book you mentioned how quickly people drop into these bliss states, and how quickly you can start seeing positive changes on your EEGs and other quantification devices.
It's amazing. We hook people up to EEGs, and we have them do EcoMeditation. And initially, the first few times, it takes them a few minutes to get into it. With one retreat, we're analyzing now, a 7-day retreat. We hook people up to the EEGs before and after the 7 days. And after the 7 days, one woman was getting there in under 60 seconds. So in less than a minute, she was having a full-blown mystical experience. And with even just 7 days of training, you can get there. Another MRI study being published soon showed that in 28 days of EcoMeditation, people began to, we could measure significant changes in the anatomy and connectivity between different regions of their brain. So it was changing brain anatomy in under 30 days. So it's amazing.
Yeah. And in a minute, I want to talk about some of the other benefits that you get from this style of meditation, like the long-lasting health, wellness, and performance benefits. But I want to say that I like this because I'm optimizing for happiness rather than materials. I'm trying to, as you say, go for the gold without amassing everything first. And so this is like a simple way, and it's every novice meditator's dream to start changing your state and getting the benefits of meditation in under 1 minute.
It is amazing. And you're right to go for happiness first, because why do people want all this stuff? They imagine all the stuff will make them happy. And yet, if you just get happy to start with, then you may have the stuff and you may not. But I challenge people by talking about the monks and nuns. I mean, these Franciscan nuns I talk about in Bliss Brain, they live in a convent. They live there their whole lives. They own absolutely nothing. These Tibetan monks who are in their monasteries in Tibet or in Dharamsala, India, they own nothing. They don't even own the robes on their backs. Those belong to the monastery, as does the wooden bed they sleep in. And they're in absolute bliss. So go for the bliss. You may get the material stuff afterwards. It makes it highly likely you're actually going to get the material stuff a lot sooner, because you're now a much more productive person, much better at problem solving. So you'll probably meet all your business goals, personal goals, marriage goals much, much, much quicker, and you'll be happy while you're doing it. So short circuit all the getting of stuff, go for the happiness, and then it's quite likely, as Jesus said, all these things shall be added unto you.
I can't remember if we covered it this conversation, but what about tapping? I did a previous podcast episode with an EFT tapping practitioner, but in terms of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and overall stress in general, like, how does tapping work? Because that's part of eco-meditation, correct?
Yeah, you do a brief tapping routine, usually at the start of eco-meditation, sometimes near the end as well. But you want to actually use tapping as a standalone technique. And so meditation is the baseline. You wake up in the morning, meditate for that 20, 30 minutes, and then you feel really good. But then you go to work, Russian hackers have a denial of service attack on your server, and then it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you want to scream. And what you do then is you tap. And the tapping really quickly calms the emotional part of the brain. We've done a lot of research now, over 100 clinical trials. It dramatically lowers depression and anxiety. It is like a magic eraser for PTSD. We worked with over 20,000 veterans with PTSD over the last decade, and we've shown that in 9 out of 10 cases of veterans with clinical PTSD, high levels of PTSD, their symptoms just vanish. The flashbacks and nightmares just go away. So EFT is what you do during the day to regulate any kind of negative emotion. And that involves tapping on acupuncture points. What we see in MRI studies or EEG studies is that the emotional midbrain, like just for example, we did one study, colleagues of mine did the study, and they had women who struggled with binge eating. And when you show these women images of pie, pasta, bread, candy, anything they crave, chocolate, their emotional midbrains became highly active. And what they were seeing wasn't a food. It was something to which they had an enormous emotional response. We then worked with them, gave them EFT treatment for a few weeks. We then put them back to the MRI, and they were shown all those same images of all those same foods they normally would crave, and the emotional midbrain was completely quiet. That's how you deal with binge eating, with cravings, with the need to control your weight, control any kind of craving, is you focus on deactivating the emotional projection and association you have with it. So you want to do that. That's what EFT does. It calms the emotional brain. So you want to have that tool as a daily stress management tool for when you need to return back to that calm state.
And is that how you transform post-traumatic stress into, what, as you call it, post-traumatic growth?
Yeah, so the research shows that a third of people who have a shattering trauma, like who went through the fire that destroyed my house, a third of the people who have served in Afghanistan and Iraq, a third of the Vietnam veterans, a third of people who have automobile crashes, a third of people who have terrible tragedies like the death of a child, a traumatic divorce, about a third of them develop PTSD. And those symptoms are flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, will this happen again, intrusive thoughts. So that's a third of the people. 2/3 of the people actually don't develop those. So 2/3 of the people who've been to Afghanistan and Iraq serving there, 2/3 of the people who are at 9/11, they did not develop PTSD, and they have resilience that often leads to post-traumatic growth. And I talked to a cancer survivor today, and she said to me, I got the diagnosis and I'm stronger today than I ever was before. She's actually grateful for having had cancer. I mean, that's resilience, and that's what happens to most people. They use the trauma and the stress as fuel for growth. EFT is wonderful for treating PTSD. With all the veterans we treated, with all the clinical trials we've done, 9 out of 10 of those veterans are able to release all of those troubling symptoms.
So back to the benefits of EcoMeditation, there's the immune system support, there's the shrinking of the fear center, the amygdala. What else? Like, what are the things that people can look forward to when they make this a regular habit?
The immune response was completely unexpected. There was a study, 2 studies actually. I did a week-long study of people at a retreat center at an EFT workshop where they did EcoMeditation every morning and then tapped throughout the day. Second study of people, and they were doing EcoMeditation all day long and tapping. So the combination of the two, one group for a week, the other for a weekend, and we were debating what neurochemicals to measure because it's expensive. We have to raise money for this. We have a small nonprofit. We have a limited budget, but we decided to spend the money and analyze this substance found in the mucous membranes called salivary immunoglobulin A. And we found, to our amazement, that it rose dramatically after the EcoMeditation weekend and after the EFT tapping week. And after the EFT tapping week, people's levels, and these immunoglobulins are important. They coat your mucous membranes, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your ears, and they're your body's first line of defense in the mucus against invading bacteria and viruses. And immunoglobulin A actually binds to the spike protein on coronaviruses and neutralizes it, makes it unable to attach to your cells. So if you have more immunoglobulins, you're more immune to coronaviruses and also other organisms. We found that in that 1 week of tapping, and we call it EFT tapping because you tap on acupressure points. So you're tapping, people meditating in the morning. We found that in 1 week, people's levels of immunoglobulins rose by 113%. And we got the results back from the lab, and we were just like, unbelievable. A week of doing these 2 stress reduction techniques, your stress goes down, cortisol drops, immunoglobulins more than double. So it's a powerful benefit you get from doing that. There are others too, but that's one of them.
That's incredible. And at a higher level, what are some of the other things, like telomere lengthening, like stem cell proliferation? What are the other benefits of meditation, and particularly EcoMeditation?
Yeah, so telomeres are your marker of aging. You want long telomeres. Stress shortens telomeres. And so one of the things that meditation studies show is the growth of telomeres. You want lots of stem cells. As you get older, your number of stem cells drops, but you can boost your stem cells by using these stress reduction methods. So again, and stem cells are the blank cells that differentiate into blood cells and skin cells and nerve cells. You need lots of skin cells for body repair. Older people don't have as many, so the body starts to break down. So it boosts stem cell production, boosts immunity. It also does things like reinforcing the sheaths around neurons. And neurons have this central conductive element, like the wire inside a power cable. They have a sheath around around the power cable that insulates it. And if your insulation's good, the conductivity in the middle is better. And so meditation actually builds up those sheaths. It improves the learning and memory centers of the brain. It definitely starts growing the emotion regulation circuits of the brain. And in the case history of this one person, one guy called Graham Phillips. Graham Phillips was a meditation skeptic or agnostic. He began to do meditation. He took a meditation course, 8-week course, but he was a TV talk show host. So before he did the meditation course, he took his whole crew into a lab and had them scan his brain with high-resolution scanners and measure the volume of each part of his brain. He went back there after 8 weeks, and they measured his brain volume again, and they found that his emotion regulation hardware, the circuit in his brain that controls emotion regulation across the brain, had grown by 22.8% in 8 weeks. It had been growing by 10% a month, that one circuit, to control negative emotion. It regulates anger, frustration, envy, jealousy, resentment, all those negative emotions. The bulk of neural tissue had grown. And that's why people, the big thing people have missed about spirituality and psychology is its bulk. And we talk about affirmations and visualizations and intentions, and it's not enough. It's not enough, Nick. I go to the gym. On a good day, I can bench press 200 pounds. Jason Momoa, I looked up his biceps. I have 13-inch biceps. He has 18-inch biceps. He can bench press 400 pounds. And I can have a goal of bench pressing 400 pounds. I can intend to bench press 400 pounds rather than the 200 pounds that's my max. I can have an intention. I can have a visualization. I can plaster my walls with visual symbols of lifting 400 pounds. And I cannot bench press 400 pounds because I only have 13-inch biceps. You just can't do it. You don't have enough mass in those muscles. Jason Momoa has that mass. So a lot of our problems are caused by us not having enough mass in our emotion regulation circuit and our attention circuit and our compassion circuit. And we can build our emotion regulation circuit to regulate negative emotions by 10% a month. That's like the amazing news from this new research. So that's what Graham Phillips did. That's what all of us can do as well.
Because the old adage was that your brain deteriorates over age. You start at a certain place, and then it's all downhill from there. And as you're describing, it can be the opposite.
It's wonderful to read studies of 85-year-olds, and their memory and learning circuits actually grow. If those 85-year-olds, for example, start to learn a complex game like chess, their memory and learning circuits actually build more mass. If they exercise, their memory and learning circuits start to grow. So there have been a lot of studies of people in their 80s, and their brains are still growing.
From the diagrams and my studies, I've learned that there isn't a lot of free space in the brain. So if your brain is growing by 20% over the course of 8 weeks, how does it still fit inside your skull?
Yeah, so it was that circuit that was growing. That circuit's called the dentate gyrus, and it's really tiny. It's like the size of my little fingernail. So it regulates emotion brain wide, but like it's really small. Your amygdala is tiny. It's like the size of your fingernail as well. It's a little structure in your brain. So it's growing, but it's not growing to be that huge. And the brain has folding. If you look at a child's brain of about the same size as an adult's brain, it's smooth on the outside. What happens is as our brains grow is they wrinkle in on themselves. And so you see very wrinkly brains as people get older. And then as you see people developing their brains and really adding to neural mass, those brains get highly wrinkled, like in geniuses. They have a lot of tissue in their brains, and their brains have a lot more of those wrinkles. So it does it by folding on itself.
So this next topic is one that I've wanted to talk to you about for a while, and it's, if anyone who's interested in productivity, it's a big one out there, and that's entering the flow state. Do you have any tips on entering the flow state faster?
A flow state is where your being and your action is one, and you're just effortlessly able to do things and manifest. It's when you get lost in playing music, lost in playing your favorite game, lost in composing a poem, lost in making love, lost in any kind of creative enterprise. So that everyone's felt that sense of flow when everything is really moving easily. time just dilates and you lose all sense of time. You're just lost in this novel you're reading. You're lost in this person you're with. So those flow states are wonderful for people, and they're high performance states in which paradoxically the prefrontal cortex is really quiet. And so you want to encourage those states because you're much more productive, much better at solving problems in flow. And meditation is a precursor to flow, and there are flow triggers. Like certain things are able to stimulate flow. One of them is novelty. You want to have novelty and challenge. Challenge stimulates flow. Not a lot of challenge. If you have too much challenge, like if I go mountain biking, I choose pretty difficult mountain biking routes, and I maintain a lot of focus. And they're a little beyond the edge of my ability as a mountain biker, and so that little bit of extra effort and attention required puts me into flow. But if I try to go on one of the Black Diamond slopes, Black Diamond trails, really expert trails as a mountain biker, way beyond, 50% beyond my ability, I'd be freaked out, make too many brain waves, I would not do well. So you want to induce flow with challenge, and challenge and novelty are flow triggers. So doing things like just drive a different way home. I often take a different route. When I go on a walk, I'll take a walk and I'll walk on the opposite side of the road. I will do novel things every year. I'll learn a new skill. I'm currently trying to learn to juggle.
Wow.
Now, I'm at the age where most people, men my age, are retired. They're on the golf course. I'm learning to juggle. I'm doing new scientific experiments. I'm volunteering for charity. I'm upping the amount I donate every year. I'm doing all these things that are novel activities. So novelty stimulates flow, but again, not too much challenge and not such novelty I can't cope. And there are a lot of flow triggers you can build into your life that way. So you then start to get used to being in flow as a daily practice. And you'll figure too, certain things will pull you out of flow. You'll learn what those are and learn to avoid them. So it's great to induce those flow states deliberately, which you can do by using the methods in Bliss Brain.
Yeah, and so I guess the primary benefits in terms of like physical and mental performance of EcoMeditation and following the Bliss Brain system are better problem solving, creativity, entering the flow state faster, more emotional connection, like empathy, and anything else that I'm missing that really stands out?
Emotional control.
Yeah.
And there are 4 sub networks in the brain that are part of the enlightenment circuit, and you're firing up the enlightenment circuit. And so attention control is one of them. Emotional regulation is the first. If you can't regulate your emotions and you watch the news and get mad, and somebody says something to you and you get resentful and you overreact, if you can't regulate your emotions, you're basically just being blown around by life. So you have to do that one first. You have to learn to focus attention, because if you turn on the attention network, like these Buddhist monks, I mean, they'll focus for 3 hours straight on the object of meditation. So you want to turn on the attention network. It's really valuable in every area of your life. The third network you need to activate is the self-absorption control network. That's the default mode network. And then there are circuits that control it, that shut it down. So you want to learn to activate those circuits that down-regulate the default mode network. And the fourth network you want to upregulate is compassion. Upregulate compassion. Those are the 4 sub-circuits of the enlightenment network. You want to get all of those firing at the same time. And then they start to grow, they start to become more efficient, and you start to feel just marvelous every day.
Dawson, there's so many other topics I want to cover with you, but we've already been going for over an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. You're a busy man. So I guess if people are interested in picking up your book, Bliss Brain, or Mind to Matter, the Genie, what's it called? The Genie in the...
Genie in Your Genes, yes.
Genie in Your Genes, or any of your other dozen books, they want to attend a workshop, they want to connect with you directly, how do they go about doing that?
The best way is just to download the free mini manual at tappinggift.com. So because EFT uses tapping like this on acupressure points, it's just tapping gift, and you get the free mini manual there, and also that immunity eco-meditation. There's a flavor of eco-meditation that we developed after we did those clinical trials that show you it boosts immunity. So there's a really useful eco-meditation track tappinggift.com. And then to get the book, just go to blissbrain.com. You also get the 8 free meditations there. So download those to your phone, have them handy, and then just really just make it a practice. Just make that commitment. 20 minutes a day, it's not very long, and you will quickly see both your internal state and your external world changing.
And you'll start to crave the feeling of finishing the meditation.
Crave the feeling.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the rapid fire round now.
Go for it.
What teachers have most influenced your life or work?
Jack Canfield is a mentor of mine, and I love Jack. He sent me an email this last week. He said, "Dawson, I just love what you do in the world. Thank you for doing it." So what a mentor. So Jack, for sure. I've loved the people who've helped me learn about money. There are people like Phil Town, who has a book on money. Another one called Simon Reed, The Tao of Trading. And becoming financially literate is so valuable because you just build wealth if you do that. So Jack's main book is The Success Principles, 64 principles drawn from the world's most successful people. I've given this to my kids. I've given this to friends. I've given Jack Canfield's book, Success Principles, to my housekeeper in Spanish. I mean, I just think that book is so wonderful. Then the financial literacy, and then the spiritual teachers. There are people like Paul Brunton, who was a writer in the 1930s and 20s and wrote about the world's great spiritual traditions. That was so influential for me. Read books like The Prophet, Khalil Gibran, and they'll really bring you into those spaces. Read the most inspirational material you can get, The Practice of the Presence of God, whatever religious tradition you're part of, and allow yourself to be moved by those great teachers. If you're an atheist or agnostic, read Marcus Aurelius, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, How to Live, a Roman emperor 2,000 years ago, giving us basic instructions for how not to be reactive, how to be compassionate. Read the works of great philosophers and saints. Fill your mind with their words, and it's a powerful antidote to all the negativity in the world out there. So any of those is handy, but learn success principles, become financially literate, and then also do things that support, that nourish you as a spiritual being on a human path. And you'll find that your whole life, I mean, if you can find this when you're 18 or 20 or 30 or 40, don't wait till you're 60 or 70. Many people do find this later in life, that's fine. But the sooner you can put these building blocks in place, the more life you have ahead of you to enjoy. So do it early. Do it now.
Yeah. Okay, so in that case, what are you interested in and researching these days?
I become really interested in the teachings of the non-dualist masters. And so I put together a series of programs which we're releasing next year. The first of them is called A 21-Day Walk with Your Higher Power. If we can hook you up with the universe as your higher power, it'll guide you from that point on. Another is called The Short Path to Oneness. We've taken all of the world's spiritual teachings about enlightenment, and with the help of some remarkable mystics, some remarkable neuroscientists, we put it into a series of 36 steps, and that takes about 9 months to do. You have a mentor. It's a complicated and much more demanding course. The 21-Day Walk with Your Higher Power is cheap, easy, quick, and simple. This one takes 9 months. It's mentored, and you have someone actually guiding you through all 36 milestones. And so I really want to now develop the ability to share those non-dual states. And my goal is to make them available free or at low cost and in some meaningful way to 1 billion people. So that's what's driving me right now.
I love that. I'm going to have to attend one of those. I don't even know if it's a workshop at that point, but one of those programs once it's available.
Yeah, well, it's called The Short Path to Oneness, and you can do it in 9 months. The traditional way of doing it was went into a monastery, did 10,000 hours over about 20 years, got initiated, and then spent another 10 years in study. So the old traditional path of getting to enlightenment was really long, hard, and demanding. And with neuroscience now, we just looked at each of those old practices with a lens of MRI research and said, this one works, that one doesn't, this one's fast, this one's slow. We then give you these evidence-based practices. And in 9 months, we bring people from just an ordinary state into everyday bliss. So it's possible now, thanks to science, in a really short period of time.
Beautiful. I love that. Okay, so tell me, this is something I came across first in Mind to Matter and again in Bliss Brain, and the concept really just lit me up. But talk to me about emotional contagion.
This is remarkable. When I was reading history, I've been interested in history my whole life, and I watch newsreels from World War II of Adolf Hitler and also Mussolini to some extent, and the Nuremberg rallies, and you see like 100,000 people in a stadium in Nuremberg, Germany, and they're all screaming Heil Hitler and giving Hitler a salute, and this crowd is going wild. And so there are these examples of emotions, just the screaming mobs in the French Revolution, or football hooligans in Britain nowadays. These mobs where these emotions are transmitted. And so epidemiologists who study infections have applied those methods to emotions and found that these negative emotions, like anger, resentment, blame, all the stuff we see at even modern political rallies, those spread really rapidly from person to person. But love, compassion, joy, kindness also spread through emotional contagion. And in this long-running study called the Framingham Heart Study, the researchers have found that if I am happy, my next door neighbor is about 35% more likely to be happy. His neighbor, who I don't even know, is 15% more likely to be happy. And his neighbor, who I definitely don't know, is 6% more likely to be happy. So positive emotions are contagious. And so I want people to meditate and then be those agents of positive emotional contagion, and for this to spread globally. And that's what I believe is happening in all kinds of ways. I'm working on a new book about that right now.
Okay. One more question before we wrap things up, and that's, what is one thing that your tribe doesn't know about you?
I have a photograph in my photograph collection of me working on the engine block of a 1976 Triumph Spitfire. And people probably don't know, I was repairing one of my cars this last weekend. They probably don't know that I do that sometimes for fun, because it's really a very mechanical process. I have a Jaguar and was having trouble starting, and I was able to fix the starting problem on my old Jaguar. So hardly anyone thinks of me as Dawson the mechanic, but I have mechanics coveralls there and all these tools. And
wow.
I can give a car a tune-up. So I don't advertise that fact, but I love getting my hands greasy.
Scientist and a mechanic. Okay, I lied. One other question. Do you take any supplements or do anything other than meditate to get into different brain states? Like right here in front of me, I have a TA. Oh, see, this is not going to work, is it? I have a TACS meter, and it's supposedly able to run a very, very small electrical current across your brain and induce. This one has the ability to induce different states. You choose the frequency and corresponding to alpha, beta, delta, theta, or gamma, and it helps entrain your brain to that. Do any of these things work?
I've had a colleague called Judith Pennington try various, not devices, but audio tracks. There, like if you go onto the App Store, there are all these tracks that says this track creates delta, this track creates
binaural
alpha.
Beats.
But yeah, binaural beats, and she's found that hardly any of them work. So they make all these claims and they don't work. So she's found a few that do, like the ones from the Monroe Institute definitely do. We use ones from iAwake Technologies. I really like those meditations myself. And so those do. In terms of supplements, I take, there's one called Life Extension Mix, which I think is great because it has about 60 different things. You have a hard time sourcing and blending, and you get them all in one mix, Life Extension. And so that's what I think is really good. And I take I have a lot of superfoods. I take, I have a daily smoothie where I'm throwing in hemp and flax and moringa and a whole bunch, goji berries, all kinds of things into a smoothie, and then taking really good supplements and multivitamins. So the combination of all of those, and it's like I know it makes me feel terrific if I take those things. I also know if I don't take them in the morning, by about 10 a.m., I'm feeling not quite as good. But I don't know which of those things is really active. I suspect that about half of them really are not doing much good at all. The problem is, I have no idea which half.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. And you don't want to have to try and taking each one individually to find out.
No, that's my routine.
There's no gamma brainwave inducing superfood. Like L-theanine is an amino acid that increases like alpha waves in the brain, but nothing for gamma.
Not that I'm aware of, but you get such big gamma, like in the MRI studies in Bliss Brain, 25 times the gamma of baseline. So you're just way out there on gamma, and I don't think it's necessary to boost it any other way. I love natural and endogenous rather than exogenous stuff from outside there.
Exogenous tends to have consequences of some form.
Like all the drugs, psilocybin, marijuana has a lot of side effects. Ecstasy has a lot of side effects. And like I took psilocybin last year, trying to figure out, how close will it get me to EcoMeditation? And the answer was maybe halfway. You can get there with drugs, but why not just generate these substances in your own brain in doses that are appropriate to your body and with no side effects?
Yeah, hard to argue with that.
Yeah, all natural.
Yeah, Dawson, any final parting thoughts?
Just make the commitment to doing it every day. That's the basic thing. Is any excuse you have for starting tomorrow, next week, next year, New Year's resolutions, blah, 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 blah. Just dump those excuses. Just start immediately. Set your alarm clock, get up half an hour early, listen to any one of those free eco-meditation tracks that's available all over the web, and just do a little experiment for 21 days. On my website, if you go to tappinggift.com, you'll find a couple of little programs you can use that take 3-4 weeks. And really, you will see and feel your body shifting. One of the cool things is we use these things like hormone tests, and we use EEGs, and we have all this equipment to monitor your body and see if your body's feeling better, doing better physiologically. But the guide to you doing better is simply subjective physical feeling. If you're feeling better, that means your stem cells are multiplying, your telomeres are lengthening, you're generating the right kinds of regenerative brain waves. So just that physical subjective feeling of well-being corresponds to all these good things happening. And just do this for a month and you'll feel better in your body. You will never, once you reach that plateau of well-being, ever want to go anywhere else.
Great. Dawson, this has been a blast. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this. I consider eco-meditation one indispensable tool for the type A skeptics and the already experienced professional Zen Buddhist meditators. And thank you for your work, sharing it with the world, and joining us tonight. You've been very graceful with your time.
It's been a joy. As you can tell, I'm totally turned on doing this. I'd rather do this than anything else in the world. So, Nick, thank you for helping get the word out there about these wonderful, simple, free, easy tools. Thanks so much.
All right. I'm Nick Urban here with Dr. Dawson Church, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.